Hey guys, it's Chelsea from Little Mountain Ranch. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to my kitchen. Today I wanted to talk to you about beans and why I believe they are one of the best things that you can store in either your short-term, long-term, or preparedness pantry. One of the big reasons why I think beans are so amazing, well, there's probably actually three main reasons why I think they are so amazing. The first one is cost. You can get a 25-pound bag of beans for around $40 off of Amazon right now. And for a little bit more, about $10 more, you can get organic beans. And I'll put a link down in the description box below of a place that I know of that you can get organic beans if that's something that you're interested in. And a 25-pound bag of beans will last us for a couple of months easily. So it is a very economical food choice for a lot of families. The second is the fact that beans will store for a very long time with very little effort. I take my beans in the paper sack they come in and I put them in a Rubbermaid container, just a basic Rubbermaid container, nothing airtight, and they will last for a year without a problem at all. I was watching another homesteading channel, the Preparedness Homestead, and she had beans in her food storage for 4 years and cooked them up the other day and they were completely fine, and they weren't stored in any fancy way either. If you want to store your beans for long-term storage and you use things like Mylar bags and oxygen absorbers, then they will last indefinitely. Beans are a really good source of plant protein. They also are super high in fiber. They have complex carbohydrates, and they also have a low glycemic index, which means that people that have diabetes can usually handle eating beans without an issue. They're high in potassium and copper and magnesium and really high in iron, along with a lot of other minerals and vitamins, and I'll put the list down in the description box below in case you're curious to see what the nutritional value is. Each bean has a slightly different nutritional value, but across the board they're pretty good in those things that I just mentioned. The other thing about beans that's great is the fact that they're really filling and you don't need a lot of them in order to feel full and actually have a lot of good nutrients as well, which can be a really big advantage if you are on a strict budget. So for all those reasons, I think beans are amazing. But I know that a lot of people have a lot of complaints about the digestibility of beans and that it upsets their stomach. So I'm going to give you a couple of tips and tricks that we use to make beans more digestible. And one of the biggest ways to make beans more digestible is just not to eat so many of them in one sitting. So one of the recipes I'm going to show you today is a barbecued baked bean. And the way that we serve that is in a small bowl with a couple of pieces of homemade bread and usually a vegetable on the side. So you're not eating bean as the main part of the meal. There are several different ways you can increase the digestibility of beans. One of them is by adding apple cider vinegar during the cooking process and even a little bit of apple cider vinegar after your beans are cooked. Also, to pre-soak your beans if you are using dry beans, to pre-soak them for at least 12 hours, 24 hours is even better. Rinse them really well. One of the big things is rinsing. So rinse them, soak them, rinse them, cook them, rinse them, and make sure even if you're buying them in cans from the store that you rinse them really, really well. That can make a really big difference in the digestibility of them. One of the other things that you can do is to use them as a side dish rather than as a main course. Even today I'm going to be showing you how to make a barbecued baked bean, which is really, really delicious, but we have it in a small bowl with a couple of pieces of bread and vegetables on the sides. And because they're so filling, you really don't need that much of them anyway, but I find if my kids fill up on a really large bowl, say a bowl like this size of beans, then they're going to end up with a tummy ache. So just restricting the amount of beans you eat at any given time. I'm going to show you several different recipes today with beans, and you'll see what I mean, where the beans are basically almost like a condiment to some of these meals. The first recipe that I would like to share with you today is a barbecued baked bean. And one of the first things that you're going to need to do to make this recipe, if you are using dry beans, is to soak your beans overnight. I would recommend soaking your beans overnight even if you're going to use an Instant Pot, which is what I'm using to cook my beans, because that extra soaking process, like I said, does help with the digestibility of your beans. If you are going to cook them in your Instant Pot, you want to use about 2 cups of beans, which equals around a pound of beans, to every 8 cups of water. The same goes for if you're cooking it on the stove, but you can decrease the amount of water that you use by a little bit. And usually in an Instant Pot, the time is about 25 to 30 minutes, depending on the kind of beans you're using. Now you can mix beans. In this recipe, I've used black beans, navy beans, and pinto beans. The only thing that you want to make sure that you do is make sure that your beans are all a uniform size or fairly close to it. Otherwise, you'll end up with some that are really mushy and some that are crunchy. If you are cooking them on the stove top, soak them for 12 to 24 hours, like I said, and then you cook them depending on the kind of bean you're using. For the smaller beans, it usually takes at least an hour. For larger beans, it can take up to 3 hours. It really depends. So best time to do your beans is in the morning so that you can cook them to whatever time they need to be the softness that you want for your meal at supper time. And also, don't add salt to your beans while they're cooking. Add your salt after to flavor them. If you add them while they're cooking, it can cause them to not soften quite as well. And for me, I really like my beans quite soft, so I always add the salt afterwards. Well, for this recipe for the baked beans, while your beans are cooking, you're going to want to chop up half a large onion and a pound of bacon. One of the tricks for cutting up bacon I have found is if you have bacon in your fridge, throw it in the freezer for a couple of hours and then chop it even an hour, because if it is more firm, it's much easier to chop. Or if you're thawing it out, just thaw it out halfway and then chop it. Chop those up into nice small bite-sized pieces and then fry it up. I like to fry my bacon and my onions together. I like to cook my onions until they are caramelized, just where they're turning brown around the edges and all the sugars in them start to come out and create that nice sticky, gooey yumminess. So fry up your onions and bacon, and once your onions and bacon are all fried and your beans are cooked, one of the things that I like to do with my beans when I'm cooking them for this recipe, and actually almost for any recipe, I like to add some garlic powder, chili powder, and a little bit of cayenne pepper just to give them a little bit of extra flavor. And then you want to take your beans out of your pressure canner carefully because they're really hot, and then go and strain them in your sink. Okay, I have just put my beans into a bowl. I have about 10 cups of beans here, and the rest of them I've set aside because I'm going to freeze them. It's always a good idea when you are cooking beans, because it's a bit of a time-consuming process, to cook extra so that you can freeze some for future use. And for some of the recipes that I'm going to show you in a minute that only require a little bit of beans, it's a really great way to have them and just have them conveniently already cooked. And I'm going to add in my pre-cooked onion and bacon, and I'm going to try to put in all of that bacon grease as well because it just makes it taste good. And then we're just going to set this aside, and I'm going to show you how to make a barbecue sauce. A couple of you asked, I had mentioned that I make my own barbecue sauce and asked if I could show you how I make that, so I'm going to do that. The base for this barbecue sauce is either ketchup, or you can also use tomato paste. If you're going to use tomato paste, you just want to water it down a little bit and add some extra seasonings. I also was asked by several people when I did my pantry tour video why we have so much ketchup and how we actually either use this much ketchup or how we dispense it. We go through about a gallon of ketchup, this much ketchup, every month. I still have 9 kids left at home and all of them like ketchup. I also use it as a base for a lot of recipes. So that is how we go through it. And then people asked how we actually dispense this. So I put it into these squeeze bottles that you can see here, restaurant style squeeze bottles. One of these fills close to 4 of these. And since we go through that in a month, it's no problem. I just put the ones that we're not using in our downstairs fridge. One of the things I love about having my condiments in squeeze bottles like this, we also buy our mayonnaise in bulk as well, is that you know how kids, when they are buttering toast or putting mayonnaise on toast or anything like that, they always get lots of crumbs. And when you're buying big bulk mayonnaise, it can be really gross with all the crumbs and stuff in there, and this completely eliminates that problem. So I love these. Okay, so you're gonna want to add, let's say about a cup of ketchup or tomato paste. If I were to be using this for steak or something that didn't already have onion in it, I would add chopped onion to this, but since I already have the onion in the beans, I'm not going to do that. And because I just don't feel like chopping garlic today, I'm just adding garlic powder. You can use diced garlic, you can use garlic powder, whatever it is you have on hand. One of the things that I love about scratch cooking where you're not using recipes is you can modify them based on what you have in your kitchen or in your food storage. Nice tablespoon of chili powder, only maybe a teaspoon of pepper or to your tastes. I use mustard powder, but you can also just use table mustard without an issue. Just taste it as you go along. That's the biggest thing about scratch cooking, is just to taste it, and then you'll know. And a little bit of paprika, smoky paprika. One of the things about adding spices, if you're not using a recipe, is start with less than you think you're going to need, and then you can add to it, because it's really hard to remove spices and herbs from your recipe, but it is easy to add to it. So add that in, mix it all around really well. And this tastes even better if you make it the day before, but I didn't do that because I wanted to show you all this recipe all at once. And then you want to add a couple of glugs of vinegar. You can use whatever kind of vinegar you like. I like balsamic vinegar because it adds a richness to recipes. I use balsamic vinegar in pasta sauce as well because I like the extra richness. But you can use white vinegar or apple cider vinegar. A little bit of Worcestershire sauce. This isn't something I always use, but it adds a nice richness and deepness of flavor to it. And then you need to add some kind of sweetening to this. I am going to use honey for my recipe today because I have lots of honey, but if you don't, you can use brown sugar, is really nice, or white sugar if that's what you have. You want to add quite a bit of sweetness. That's what makes barbecue sauce taste so good. So I'm going to add, let's see, a half a cup. And then mix this in well. This takes a few minutes to mix if you've added honey, just to make sure it gets evenly dispersed throughout it all. I was never a huge fan of beans, and I tried very many different baked beans recipes and was never able to find one that worked. And I realized after that the problem was I was actually baking the beans in with the sauce, which I didn't like. It made the beans too sweet and too rich, and also made them kind of mushy. So I find that by cooking the beans separate like this and then adding the sauce and then basically serving it pretty much right away, it gets rid of all those problems and it just tastes so good. So then add your sauce to your beans and very carefully stir it, because like I said, beans are mushy, so you don't want to over stir them and have it just be a big mushy mess. This looks so good and it smells so good. Oh my goodness. A spatula works really well for stirring this because you basically like fold it in rather than stir, like a vigorous stirring motion. Oh my word. You see how beautiful that looks? I mean, I guess it doesn't really look that beautiful, but it smells really, really good. I serve this with homemade biscuits, buns, or bread. Bread is my personal favorite, white, thick, fluffy bread. Oh my goodness. And you can also sprinkle a little bit of cheese on this as well if you want to add a little bit of extra yumminess to it. So that is the first recipe I want to share with you. You can flavor your beans for these recipes, or you can even leave them plain. They taste fine if they're plain. I already have flavorings, as you saw. I added some spices into the beans when they were cooking. But if I wanted to get a little bit more creative, I might mix some extra spices and herbs into here, maybe some chopped onion, and even a little bit of brown sugar just to sweeten them up a little bit for this recipe. So on my plate, maybe I'll bring the camera over here so it's easier for you to see. Just 1 second. Okay, I am going to take some lettuce and put it on my plate like this. Just a little bit more. And a little bit of my brown rice. And then to this, I'm going to add some beans. And to this, a little sprinkle of cheese and a little bit of sour cream and some salsa. This is really delicious. It's kind of a Mexican salad or a taco-less taco. And because of the beans and the rice, it's really, really filling, and the greens add a little bit of extra nutrition to it. So this is a delicious way to eat beans. You can basically do the same thing, put all of those things into a tortilla and have a tortilla, or you can make refried beans with these beans. The traditional bean for refried beans are pinto beans, and I have actually quite a few pinto beans in here, but I also have black beans and a few navy beans, which just gives it a little bit more of a complex flavor. So just mash your beans up. You can use a potato masher, or just with a small amount like this, you can just use a fork. Refried beans aren't actually beans that are fried twice. It comes from a Spanish word, refrito, which just means well fried. So you can, if you want, fry these up with a little bit of bacon grease, and that makes them taste really good. But I'm just going to use them like this. I add a little bit of lemon juice to mine, and typical spices you would use for Mexican food, like cumin and chili powder and salt and pepper. And if they're really thick like this, you can add a little bit of water if you want them a little bit runnier. So you take your tortilla and then add whatever toppings you would like to it. I'm definitely going to add some of my homemade salsa, a little bit of lettuce, and a little sprinkle of cheese. And there you have it, a burrito. You can also make a really easy chili with them, which I can show you how to do in a future video if you would like. I add them to almost any soup I make. You can just add a cup to them. And it just helps to bulk up lots of different recipes, any soups or stews or anything like that. So I definitely think that among the pantry staples, that beans should be in the kind of the top 5 different pantry staples that I will always have in my pantry. I need to get going though and actually feed all of this food to my hungry kids. It is now lunchtime, but I just wanted to send out a virtual hug to all of you and just to say, hang in there. I know the times that we're living in right now are very complicated. No matter what your opinion is on what is happening, it's definitely a complicated time, and I know that it's evoking a lot of fear in a lot of people. And I'm hoping that by sharing some of the information that I have about preparedness and some of the things that are helping me to feel more calm, that I can pass that on to you. For me, definitely, without a doubt, being prepared for whatever might come has helped immensely with my state of mind and my overall anxiety. And remember, if you like this video, please hit the thumbs up button. That really gives me a signal on what videos you guys are enjoying. And also, if you haven't subscribed, consider subscribing and hit the little bell down below so you can be notified when I put out videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Bye.